Welcome to Double Portion Inheritance with Maria Marola and Gary Wold, brought to you by DoublePortionInheritance.com. Since 1981, Maria heard the call of Yahuwah to become a watchman to the house of Yisrael and to those within the traditional Christian church. She was instructed to warn them against the false doctrines and pagan traditions of men. After 25 years of studying Scripture, the word of Yahuwah came to Maria again in 2007 as she was called out of the corporate world to become a full-time intercessor and prophetic teacher. The name of the ministry, Double Portion Inheritance, was given to her after she received the revelation of the two houses of Yisrael from Ezekiel 37:16. The mission of this ministry is to bring together the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph for the return of the Messiah, Yahushua. And now, Maria Marola.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today is March 13th, 2021, and the title of this podcast is A Beginner's Guide to Observing Passover. Now, I just wrote this blog last night because every year it seems like I like to talk about the prophetic meaning, the prophetic shadow pictures that can be observed in the Pesach or the Passover. But there are so many people who feel intimidated about celebrating Passover in the privacy of their own homes. They write to me and they say, well, we don't have any Messianic fellowships. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to do it. And so it's been on my heart to write a beginner's guide to observing Passover, just the bare minimum requirement. You don't have to get all fancy with a Passover Seder. Don't get me wrong. I think the Passover Seder is beautiful. I actually wrote my own new renewed covenant Passover Haggadah or Passover Seder back in 2007. I will attach it to this blog. If I can figure it out, I have trouble figuring out how to attach documents to blogs, but I'm going to go on YouTube and figure that out.
Is that the one that we
used to use, the booklet?
Is that the one you borrowed from someone else and did some massive update?
Yes, I borrowed a Haggadah from a Messianic rabbi that I know. And basically what I did was I updated it and put all the sacred names back in because he was just using, Lord and God. And I put, Yahuwah in there and things like that. I did eliminate the roasted egg because I feel like the roasted egg kind of seems a little bit more like too much like Easter, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, lately I've been rethinking it and thinking, well, when a little chicken hatches from the egg, it's like a rebirth, right? So I can see how that could be a metaphor, but because the heathens have used the eggs in a different way, it's kind of, it sends a message that people get confused about. And so I don't want to give anyone the impression, oh, well, Easter eggs are okay because, it's used in the Passover Seder meal, but I'm not condemning people for using the roasted egg. That's not my message. I'm just saying to avoid confusion, I don't use it because the scripture doesn't tell us we have to use the roasted egg. So
optional.
I love the way the Jewish people have put together the Passover Seder. It's so beautiful, and there's so many prophetic shadow pictures of Messiah in it, and not to diminish that, but there's so many people, Christians, just coming out of the church and saying, I want to keep Passover, but I don't know how. They don't know any Messianic fellowships where they can go, and they feel intimidated by even starting, so they just shy away from Passover altogether. And so what I want to do is show you, look, all you got to do is follow the instructions of Exodus 12. That's it. That's all you got to do. It's not as, we overcomplicate things. As humans, we always overcomplicate things, and I just want to keep it simple so that you won't be discouraged from wanting to keep the Pesach. So I want to start with Exodus 12. And just go there with me. Those of you that have your Bibles, go to Exodus 12. I'm going to be using King James Plus because I can hover over each word and see what the word is in Hebrew.
A good plug for eSword.
Yes. Okay. So, and whenever I see the word Lord in all capital letters, I put the proper name back in because the Father's proper name is 4 Hebrew letters, Yod-He, Wah-He. Which is Yahuwah, okay? Now, some people pronounce it in the modern way, which is Yehovah, but there is no letter V in ancient Hebrew. Even the Jewish Encyclopedia admits that the Vav used to be a wall, like a W sound in our English language. So it's Yahuwah. So whenever I see the word Lord in all caps, it's supposed to be the proper name. The English translators replaced 6,800 times, replaced our Creator's name with a title, Lord. And he wants to be known by his name, not just a title. Okay. All right. So Exodus 12:1. And Yahuwah spoke unto Moshe and Aharon, that's how you say Aaron's name in Hebrew, in the land of Mitzrayim or Egypt, saying, this month, okay, shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Now, what month is he referring to? Because he doesn't identify it. So go with me to chapter 13, Exodus 13. Now we're going to know what month he's talking about. Okay. The Feast of Unleavened Bread. It says here at the heading, it says, and Moshe said unto the people, remember this day in which you came out from Mitzrayim or Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand Yahuwah brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. And then it says, this day came you out in the month Abib. Okay, that's the name of the month. It's called Abib. And it's spelled with 3 Hebrew letters, Aleph, Bet, Ayin, or no, Aleph, Bet, Bet, excuse me. 2 houses, right? So even the Hebrew letters paint a picture, because the Hebrew letter Aleph is a picture of the head of the ox. It symbolizes the strong leader. So the father is he's the leader of the house, right? He's the Ab. That's why we call him Abba, right? Abba. And the letter Bet in Hebrew is a picture of a house. It represents the house. So there's 2 houses of Israel now. Now, in this time period, there were the Egyptians who wanted to join the Israelites. They were the strangers who wanted to sojourn with them. And then there's those that were born into the tribe. Those were the natural born Israelites. So there was even 2 houses back then. There was the strangers who joined with them, and then there was the natural born Israelites. So there's 2 letter B's in the word Abib, because the letter A is the Hebrew letter Aleph, which means the leader of the house, and the 2 B's represent the 2 houses, right? So in the month Abib is the Hebrew word. It says an unused root meaning to be tender, to be green. That is a young ear of grain, hence the name of the month Abib. Now it says here, green ears of corn. Now that's not talking about maize corn. That's talking about barley corn. And so how do we know? Well, in Exodus 9, if you go there with me to Exodus 9, we know what time of year this was. It tells us right here in Exodus 9:31, and the flax and the barley was smitten. For the barley was in the ear and the flax was bold. And that word bold means a flower, like it's a calyx of a flower. So it was budding is what that means. Okay. And it says that, but the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. So this was not the season of the wheat or the rye. Okay. Now it's important to understand that in Israel there are 3 harvest times, and those 3 harvest times serve as a shadow picture of 3 historical periods in history. So first, in the spring, you've got the barley harvest, right? And the barley harvest symbolizes when our Messiah died on the tree. And what did he do after he died on the tree? It says here in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, it says, wherefore he said, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive, and he gave gifts unto men. Now that he ascended, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? He that descended is the same also that ascended far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. So, right after he died, where did he go? Scripture tells us he went into the lower parts of the earth. And where exactly is that? Luke 16 tells us it's Abraham's bosom. Okay? And we know that this is a real place. This was not a parable that our Messiah was telling. There's an actual place called paradise, otherwise known as Abraham's bosom. Okay? And so in Luke 16, we read a story about the rich man and Lazarus. Now, some people like to say, oh, that was just a parable. No, he named real people. He named Abraham. He named Moses. He named Lazarus. If it was a parable, he would have said there was a certain man, there was a certain woman. No, whenever he's telling a true story, he's naming true people, real characters. So this is a true account. Okay, so that's where he went. He went to Abraham's bosom. And what did he do? He preached the gospel to all those people who were in Abraham's bosom, who were righteous people, but they did not have a permanent atonement for sin. They had to go every year to Jerusalem and take part in the Yom Kippur fast. And the high priest had to declare whether they were accepted that year or not accepted. So every year they had to rehearse the atonement process until Messiah came. And now we don't have to go through that anymore because his atonement is once and for all. I'm not saying that we don't celebrate Yom Kippur. We certainly do. Yom Kippur serves as a shadow picture of him, and it's a memorial that we still keep to remind us of what he did for us. But he became that ultimate sacrifice for Yom Kippur as well as for Passover. So my point in saying all this is he went into the lower parts of the earth, preached the gospel to those righteous souls that were in paradise, and gave gifts unto them, the gift of salvation. And what did he do? He presented them to the Father as his first fruits offering. So every year, the high priest, during the barley season, right after Passover, the first Sabbath following the Passover, the high priest was to go into the temple, and he was supposed to be the one to cut the first barley sheaf and wave it in the temple before Yahuwah as his first fruits offering. Well, our Messiah did that. He fulfilled the first fruits offering when he brought before the Father all those souls that were in Abraham's bosom, and that was his first fruits offering. Okay? So that was the first harvest in history. And it was at the time of the barley. Remember, in Matthew's gospel, it tells us, I believe in Matthew 27, right after he takes his last breath and he says, it is finished, right? What happened right after that? It says he cried with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost, or that's the King James word, yielded up the Ruach, the Spirit. And it says, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in two from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent. That means the rocks actually broke, and the graves were opened. And many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. Okay? So that's the first harvest of history. is right after he died. He brought forth these saints, and they were resurrected. Many of them were resurrected. Okay. Um, but now there's another harvest period, which is the wheat harvest, and that's at the time of Pentecost. And then there's an end time harvest, which hasn't happened yet in history. That end time harvest will be the second wheat harvest of the year, because there's two wheat harvests in Israel, one in the spring and one in the fall. And the second harvest represents the end time harvest, when Messiah comes back and he gathers his elect from the four corners of the earth and he harvests his wheat. Okay. So these three harvest periods in Israel represent prophetic events in history. Okay. So in Exodus 12, now we know what month is being spoken of. It's the month Abib. But as you know, how do we know it's the month Abib? Well, let's go to Genesis 1, because I want to show you in Genesis 1:14 through 16, Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." Now, this word signs is the Hebrew word ot, and it means a signal, a mark, a miracle, evidence. But the word seasons is moed, and the plural word is moedim. Okay, and it literally means an appointment, a fixed time or a season, specifically a festival. Okay, so it's a solemn assembly, it's a festival. So in other words, he's given us lights in the heavens to not only divide the day from the night, but also to discern what time of year we're supposed to be keeping his prophetic feasts. Okay? And he says, "And let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. So obviously the greater light is the sun and the lesser light is the moon. And it says he made the stars also. So right here we've got three witnesses. We've got the sun, the moon, and the stars are the witness. So how do we know when to keep the Pesach or the Passover? Well, every year we have to make sure we're not keeping two Passovers within the same year. So the vernal equinox or the spring equinox, which is a Hebrew word called tekufa means a revolution around the sun. It's when the earth has made a full revolution around the sun, which takes approximately 365 days. It used to only be 360 days before the days of the flood, but now it takes longer because after the flood, the Earth's poles shifted. And so things take longer now. But as we get closer to the end of days, the spring equinox keeps coming sooner and sooner. And, it used to be that the spring equinox was on March 25th. Now every year it tends to be around the 20th, or last year it was on the 19th of March. So when Messiah said the days would be shortened in the last days, that's what I believe he means. I believe he means that instead of having to wait till March 25th for the vernal equinox or the spring equinox, now the equinox keeps coming sooner, because I believe all the earthquakes, all the tsunamis, all the, the natural disasters in the world are shifting the earth back to the way it was during the days of the flood, because as in the days of Noah, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So I believe the earth is being shifted back to those days where each month is going to be exactly 30 days. Okay. And so, but the point I'm making is that the way we know that a full year has elapsed is we know when the vernal equinox takes place. And this year it happened on the 20th. Okay. the 20th of March. So we know that even though the new moon is coming tonight on the 14th, the equinox is going to be on the 20th. And let me pull up a moon phase calendar for those of you who want to understand um, moon phases, so you understand how we're determining the time of year that we keep the Passover, because that's also very important. Okay. So here we are looking at March 2021. On the 14th, right here, looks completely dark. But if this is for the zip code that I'm currently living in, if I were to change the time world clock to Jerusalem, let's see, how do we change it to Jerusalem? Israel, Jerusalem. Trying to set it for Jerusalem time, but I'm not really sure how to do that on here. But the point being is that right now it's visible at 2% in Jerusalem. We might not see it here, but it's visible tonight at 2%. So the moon watchers that live in Jerusalem are going to report their findings to us, and we're going to know that tonight in Jerusalem was the new moon. We don't go by the dark moon, because last night was the 13th. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. Today's the 13th. I'm looking at the wrong date here. Tonight, the 13th becomes the 14th, because why? The sun down is the new calendar date. When the sun goes down, it becomes a new calendar date. So right here, tonight is the 13th, but as soon as the sun goes down, it becomes the 14th.
In Jerusalem, it says that the new moon, which is the conjunction,
right,
fully black, is March 13th at 12:21 p.m., so just after noon.
Right. But tomorrow night, Sunday night, it's going to be at 2%. Now, what do you say, Perry? I'd just like to get your input. Do you think the new moon's tonight or tomorrow night? You think it's going to be sighted tonight or tomorrow night?
I believe it's tomorrow.
I do too.
Will be because I keep track of the days of a month.
Right.
I mean, once it's identified in Israel, I immediately go to my calendar and I actually by hand on a Gregorian calendar count out 29 and 30 days.
Right.
So I know that the next month that I will be expecting it to happen, because a lunar cycle is 29.5 digit days long. So we know that it has to happen within that parameter of time. If it goes to the 30th day, let's say it's cloudy and all over Israel, they can't see it with the naked eye. Then by default, it goes to the 30th, because you can't push it past there or it messes up the whole calendar system. So the 29th day will be tomorrow night at sunset on the 14th on our Gregorian calendar of March.
Exactly. That's what I believe too, because even though it says 1% visible, it's so faint you really can't see it to the naked eye. So it has to be visible to the naked eye, and the moon watchers in Israel are trained to know how to look for that. And as soon as you can only see the sliver at sunset, when the sun is starting to go down and it casts the light onto that tiny sliver. And so tomorrow night, the 14th at sundown, will begin the new year and the new month. It's going to be Rosh Chodesh, new month, and Rosh Hashanah, the new year. Okay. Now, on the 20th, right here, which is next Saturday, is the spring equinox. That means if you count backwards to last year's Passover, it will be exactly 366 days since we kept the Passover last year. So we're still within you don't want to keep two Passovers in the same year. So once the equinox is here, then we know, okay, we're not going to be keeping two Passovers now, because it's already been 366 days since last year's Passover. So what you want to do is you want to start with the new year, which is right here. I believe the new year will start right here on the 14th, and we count 14 days, right? So the new year is determined by the sun, the moon, and the stars. So the witness of the moon. Also, in this month, when the Passover begins, it's always the sun is in Aries, the ram. Now, I'm not promoting astrology because I don't believe in, personal, forecasting your personal, zodiac or whatever. That's forbidden in Deuteronomy chapter, I think it's Deuteronomy 18 says that we are not to practice that. Okay, that is a form of witchcraft. But the stars, the constellations were placed there by Yahuwah himself, and those constellations were placed there for signs and for seasons. But the heathens abuse the purpose of the constellations, and they try to use it for personal fortune telling. And we're not to use the stars for personal fortune telling. Okay, so in the month of the ram is when the Passover is supposed to occur, because why? Who was the first born to ever be sacrificed? It was Abraham's son, Isaac, Yitzhak. Yahuwah told Abraham to offer up your firstborn son. And Abraham was willing to do it. Now, he didn't plunge the knife. I mean, he started to plunge the knife, but the malach, the angel, stopped him from doing so. But nevertheless, from his heart, Abraham had already given up his son. And because he passed the test, Isaac was the firstborn, but there was a substitute offering waiting, and that was a ram with his horn caught in a thicket. So the ram is a symbol of the firstborn. And that's the entire purpose of the Passover, is for the firstborn. That is the purpose of the Passover, to redeem the firstborn. Okay? So during the month of Aries, the ram, that's when the Passover should begin. So the witness of the stars should be that the ram should be visible over Jerusalem during the Passover. Okay. So we're going to count 14 days like the scripture tells us. And we're going to start at sundown on the 14th. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay. Now on the 28th, which is a Sunday, that is the 14th day, right? So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. But over here on Saturday, the 27th at sundown, that's the 13th, going into the 14th. That would be equivalent to the night when our Messiah commanded his disciples to go and prepare the Passover that we may eat it. Okay, so that was the 13th going into the 14th. As soon as the sun went down, they had what traditionally is called the Last Supper. And I do believe there was a lamb involved. Now, the gospel doesn't tell us there was a lamb, but the word Passover, Pesach, actually means the lamb. So if there was no lamb involved, if all it was bread and wine, you can't call it a Passover. Okay? You just call it having bread and wine. So, yes, he ate unleavened bread, and there was a lamb involved, because he identified it and said, go and prepare the Pesach, or the Passover, that we may eat it. Well, the word Passover doesn't mean bread. The word Pesach in Hebrew means the lamb. So when he says, go and prepare the Passover that we may eat it, he's saying, go and prepare the lamb that we may eat it. So he and his disciples did a private Passover in the upper room. Okay. And that's what Saturday night, the 27th, after sundown, that's what we will be doing. We will be memorializing that event. Okay. Then the next day, all day on Sunday, is the continuation of the 14th of Abib. And we are going to still be keeping Passover. We're going to remember the day that he was escorted outside of Jerusalem to the place of the skull and where he was crucified for us. At sundown on the 28th, then becomes the 15th day of the month Abib. We start celebrating the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That memorializes when he was taken down from the cross and buried. They had to do it before the sun went down because they weren't allowed to do any work. And so they had to hurry up and take his body down, and they buried him in a tomb that belonged to Joseph of Arimathea. And then all day Monday will be the continuation of the 15th of Abib. All day Monday is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We are to start here eating unleavened bread for 7 full days. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then April 4th is the 7th day of eating unleavened bread. And then at sundown, Sunday, the April 4th, we conclude the days of unleavened bread. So at sundown, Sunday the 4th, March 4th, we are allowed to eat leaven. Okay. So before we continue, I would like to make sure everyone is clear and they understand what I just presented. So please unmute yourself and ask any questions about the calendar dates if you have any. Anyone has any questions, put your hand up or unmute yourself. Okay.
It's Barb. So I was a little confused there for a while because like on the calendar we have, it calls it the month of Nisan. So then I realized that that was the name. All the names of the months are from the Babylonian
That's right.
captivity. So Abib comes from what it was originally called before
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Babylonian captivity. And that would be true for all the months. Is that correct? You can find a corresponding name.
Yes, some of them have actual names, and some of them are just called like the 6th month or something like that. Okay. That I've been able to find in scripture. Okay. Like for instance, the 7th month, the Babylonian name, they call it Tishrei, but in the Bible, it's called Etanim. Okay. So the 7th month of the year is called Etanim. It comes from the word Ethan. Like, we name somebody Ethan, like Ethan Allen Furniture. That name, Ethan, is Etan in Hebrew. So Etanim is a plural of Etan, which is Ethan. Okay. So it's the 7th month of the year. So there are certain months that are named in scripture, like the month of Adar, Esther, in the book of Esther, that's right. The 12th month, but we don't see all of the months named. I think it's in, what's the one for Hanukkah? It's in Haggai chapter 2. He says the 24th day of the 9th month, Heshvan, that's the 9th month of the year. But I think that's a, oh gosh, that word, it's what, Heshvan or something like that. So yeah, there's different names in the Bible for these months, but they're not, I don't see all of them named in there.
One other question. So the Jewish community, they recognize the head of the new year as Rosh Hashanah in the fall.
That's right. Yeah.
Do they, if they're not Messianic, do they recognize this as truly the head of the new year?
Yes, there's 2 New Years. And I explained that in one of my blogs.
Okay.
I have a blog called Times, Seasons, and the Thief in the Night.
It's nice and confusing.
And so there's actually 2 New Years. Okay. So there's the New Year. So a Messianic teacher that I listened to a long time ago, he said this, his name is Norm Franz, and he explained it well. He explained it so well. He says that in the Bible, all the dates from the beginning of the Genesis at the creation, right up until the Exodus, all the dates mentioned in scripture were based on the linear calendar, right? So when Yahuwah created the heavens and the earth, that was in the 7th month of the year, which is called, Etanim or Tishrei. And then when Yahuwah took Israel out of Egypt, he established a different calendar, another calendar. So the first calendar measures linear time itself. So every year on Yom Kippur, from Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur, is how linear time is measured. Okay. That's why every year on Yom Kippur, every seventh year on Yom Kippur, they are supposed to blow the shofar over the land and declare it's a Shemitah. A Shemitah is a sabbatical year. Okay. Every 49th year, it's a, help me, my memories. It's a Shabua. Okay. It's a Shabua. Excuse me. Yeah. So the 49th year is a Shabua. The 50th year is the Jubilee.
Every seventh year is a Shabua. And then the 49th is a Shabua because it's a Shabua of Shabuas.
Exactly.
It's the seven of sevens.
Right.
Shabua of the Shabua. Now, you can't count 50 and then start again 1. It's always a 7. It's always Shemitah. It's always 7 years.
That's right. So the point being is that we count the linear years on Yom Kippur. So from Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur is the linear years. Now in the spring, we count our spiritual redemption. Okay, so there's the physical when Yahuwah created the heavens and the earth, the linear new year, and it's like a fiscal year. You know, like a lot of companies have a fiscal year in September where they bring in in farming, they bring in the harvest in the fall and they account for their harvest and they tally up, this is how much we produced this year. Okay. So that's like a fiscal year. So the Jewish people celebrate the fiscal new year, which is it's on the civil calendar. They have a Jewish, a fiscal new year in the fall, which has to do with accounting and bringing in the harvest and counting how much you produced. But there's the spiritual new year, right? And the spiritual new year is to remind us of when Yahuwah gave us rebirth. He made Israel born again. I mean, they were in Egypt, they were in slavery, and now he's saying, this is a new time for you. This is a new year. I want you to remember your spiritual rebirth. Okay? So there's actually 2 New Years.
Okay, I think you just gave me my spiritual nugget.
Okay.
I got my nugget. Totally get it now. I've never had that explained.
Yes.
The physical versus the spiritual. Okay, got it.
Right.
Yay.
Maria?
Yeah.
Maria?
Go ahead.
You said some incredible English words there. And accounting, right?
Yes.
Look at those. It's a 7. To me, it has become a 7-month accounting of my life, right? A 7-month processing of Pesach, unleavened bread, first fruits, right?
Yes.
Leading up to Shavuot, right? Then you get into the 6th month, and it's Toshiva, preparing you for Yom Kippur. Then 10 days before that, a trumpet is sounded saying, get ready, because here it comes, gang.
That's
and
right.
Then if you process the 7 Shemitahs, you're going to have all your debts canceled. It's an accounting thing.
Exactly.
And we're righteous because of his righteousness.
That's right.
It's wonderful. It's a rehearsal of all of that. It's wonderful.
Amen.
Amen.
Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel.
So according to Norm Franz, he's the one that taught me this back in 2007. I was listening to one of his DVDs, and he said that basically all from the time that Yahuwah brought Israel out of Egypt up until the book of Revelation, all the dates mentioned after that are based on the spiritual calendar. But right before Egypt, all the dates mentioned, like in the days of the flood, were based on the linear calendar, the civil calendar. Okay. So I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. So, but of course, look at this. I mean, it says the beginning of months. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. The word beginning in Hebrew, if you hover over that, it's Rosh. Rosh means the beginning or the head. Okay. And it actually means to shake. Why? Because they would shake the heads of the barley until the kernel came out. They would actually beat the barley until the heads came out. Okay. Yeah. So the beginning, Rosh, and then months is plural, and it's Kodesh, and Kodesh means the new moon. By implication, a month. It shall be the beginning of months. It's the beginning of the 7-month agricultural calendar, because there's a 7-month period where we're measuring the months that pertain to the feast days. So the months that pertain to the feast days begin with Abib and end in the 7th month of Tishri or Etanim. So the beginning of months it's a 7-month cycle. Okay. But in the linear new year, it's the 12-month cycle. Okay.
So agriculture is always related to the spirit.
Right.
That's why they're synonymous.
So this month shall be into the beginning of months. It shall be the first. And here we go. The word first is Rishon, month, Kodesh, of the year, Shana. So we actually see embedded in this phrase, Rosh Hashanah. It's Rosh Kodesh, beginning of the month, and it's Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year. Okay? So, the Jewish people call the Feast of Trumpets Rosh Hashanah, but the scripture doesn't call it that. The scripture does not call the Feast of Trumpets Rosh Hashanah. The scripture calls it Yom Teruah, the day of blowing. Okay. So more accurately, I think we should be calling the first of Abib Rosh Hashanah, because that's what the scripture calls it. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the Jewish people are wrong per se. I understand why they're calling, that's the fiscal year, that's the linear new year. I get that, but I wouldn't be calling it Rosh Hashanah, because it's not really. I understand it's the head of the linear year, but the scripture calls it Yom Teruah.
I think it's just indicative of how nations across the world have strayed away from Yahuwah in his word. Mm-hmm. And they're more about just counting linear time for the purposes of counting time. And so they give the head of the year name to what they're doing now as this is the most important thing for us, as the nation, to count the years.
Right. So does everyone understand the moon phases? And Perry, do you agree with what I presented?
I just wholeheartedly agree with your stance, and I have for years. I don't like to stray away from what Torah says. I don't like to add or subtract. Right. I try to stay as simplistic as possible in my worship. So,
except I would say that the Jews are wrong to say that, because it misleads people.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand. It does mislead people. It's kind of one of those things where it's a gray area where yes and no. Yeah, I understand why they're calling it that, but that's not what scripture calls it.
The important thing to me significantly is that there's something mixed with the lunar cycle to declare Rosh Hashanah. It's agricultural, right? Yes. And in order to keep the calendar straight from heaven, right? He ordains when that barley gets ripe in the land of Israel, right?
That's right.
To keep it in order, because every number of years there's the 13th month.
That's right.
On a lunar cycle, there'll be a 13th month. So just to keep the calendar in order with the sun, the moon, and the stars, and where the earth is, and all of that. So
I've actually read there's 4 New Years in Judaism, that they also count the New Year for trees. Okay, when you're supposed to plant trees, and then there's another year, New Year for livestock. So they say there's 4 different New Years for different things.
But the word also says, and they will change the times and the seasons. Yes. And that's why we bring this out in the word.
Yeah.
That's right.
To help people come back to understand, because we've gone into captivity so many different times over that we live in a very confused state.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. I just don't want people to give all the Jews a bad rap where they go, the Jews do everything wrong. For sure. Because obviously they are not doing everything wrong, because even the scepter has been given to the house of Judah, so I just want people to see it in a more balanced way. And I agree with you, Emily, and I just want people to see things in a balanced way, that they're not entirely wrong. They're just,
Yeah.
We're all in agreement. Whenever you use the wrong term for something, there's a chance of misunderstanding and misleading. How much more when it's an important thing like scripture, or like running the nuclear reactor. You don't want to use the wrong terminology to talk with your coworkers about how to keep it cool, right?
Exactly.
You want to use the accurate terms that everyone understands.
Totally.
It's the same with Torah.
Right. So we have shared this information with people, and they have gone to rabbis, and rabbis have said, yes, they are correct, but this is the way we've done it for so many years.
So we're staying with the tradition.
and so that's why I say that, because if you do take Maria's information and you take it to a rabbi, they're going to say, yes, Maria is correct here, but this is the way we've been doing it for such a long time. It's going to take a long time to actually go back to that. The ancient path.
In light of that, I was told that a number of years ago, if there is a Sanhedrin that is recognized, they have recognized, at least leading rabbis in Jerusalem have recognized that they were wrong for thousands of years, and that it actually is the sighted moon that declares the first Rosh Chodesh of the month, the first day of the month. So it's not conjunction. It's not when it's dark. It's when the sliver comes on and you can identify it. So they're acknowledging these things. So, but thousands of years of tradition, are not resolved in days or years, maybe. So it takes the moving of the Ruach HaKodesh to bring this about, and change takes time. But there will be change. I mean, these things will get accurate. Of course, we know when he comes, he'll prove it out. So, but I think our heart intent, I think, as you said at the beginning of this, that it's our heart, saying, I want to know the truth.
Right.
I don't pull back from asking him that all the time. Keep me from ignorance. Keep me from presumptuous sin, as David said.
Exactly.
Accountable to go back and search yourself.
Search it out. Be a Berean, right?
Oh, Dan wanted to ask for clarification. Is the fourth a Shabbat also? For the end of unleavened bread?
Yes. Okay, we're going to cover that as we read Exodus 12.
Perfect.
Okay, so we're going to go right into reading Exodus 12 so that you can see the full thing of what we're commanded to do. So I'm going to start with my blog. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, a beginner's guide to observing Passover. Because I didn't get to finish this blog. There's more that needs to go into this blog. But I was up all night. I didn't get enough sleep. So I kind of just did as much as I could and went to bed. But I'm going to be adding more to this blog. I'm going to be adding more having to do with the timing of Passover and how do we determine the new year and how do we determine when we keep Passover. So there's, like I said at the beginning, there's many followers of Messiah, Yahushua, that would like to begin observing Passover, but they don't know where to begin. And this is the same situation I found myself in back in 2004 when I first began celebrating the biblical feast days all by myself in my home. Gradually, I began inviting people over to my home that were ready to give up pagan holidays, and they were ready to learn about the Hebraic roots of our faith. So to keep it easy and to fulfill the commandments of Passover, I would like to suggest a simple guide from Exodus 12. And so that by saying that, I just mean as long as you follow what is outlined there, and we can't do all of it, and I'll explain why we can't do all of it. Okay, so just bear with me. I'll explain what I mean in a minute. But as long as you follow Exodus 12 as a guide, you don't really need a Passover Seder or a Haggadah. And I'm not dogging that. I love the Passover Seder. I think it's beautiful. But just to start getting your feet wet, You don't have to be intimidated by that. Just follow what it says in Exodus 12.
Perry spoke of this basically, and we have for years. Whenever you're looking at scripture, it's important to be clear on what it says is required. And then you can use tradition to help you celebrate that and to help you memorialize that along with what's required. Always careful to say, this is what's required. This is the extra stuff we choose to do because we see more shadow types. We want to bring other things out.
Right. So, many believers are intimidated by the Jewish Seder meal and all that goes into preparing for one, so they shy away from keeping Passover altogether. However, Yahuwah, I believe, honors baby steps. So please do not refrain from celebrating a Passover memorial just because you're afraid of not doing things perfectly. Okay? One thing that particularly stands out to me in Scripture is when King Hezekiah sent letters to the exiled house of Ephraim, and he invited them to attend the Passover in Jerusalem, even though they had not participated in many years. The 10 northern tribes of the house of Ephraim were forbidden by King Jeroboam to attend Jerusalem for the feasts, and thus they had not been allowed to attend during their exile in the Assyrian captivity. Now, what I particularly find fascinating is that in 2 Chronicles 30, verse 15 through 27, we read that Yahuwah honored the actions of Hezekiah because he was taking baby steps to reintroduce the Passover celebration to these lost sheep, even though they were not fully sanctified. Yet, his efforts were rewarded by Elohim. So let's read 2 Chronicles 30, starting with verse 15. Okay. It says here, then they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the second month. Now, why the second month? Because in the Torah, there is provision for those who were not able to keep the first Passover because either they touched a dead body, and because they touched a dead body, they became unclean. They couldn't go into the temple, or they were on a journey, so they couldn't make it to Jerusalem in time for the Passover. So in our modern times, say that somebody's not ready to keep the Passover. Maybe they're just not convicted in their heart to do it yet, or maybe they just don't feel ready. Okay. But if they maybe get baptized, cleanse themselves, sanctify themselves in the meantime, and then by the second month, by the 14th day of the second month, they feel ready to finally do it. Yahuwah makes provision for that. You can keep a second Passover in the second month. Okay. And we've done that. I've done that. I've kept 2 Passovers before, the first month and the second month, because he's made provision for those that were not ready in the first month. So this was the second month of the year. It says, and then they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the second month, and the priests and the Levites were ashamed and sanctified themselves and brought in the burnt offerings into the house of Yahuwah. Now, one thing I want to bring out is in the second month is the constellation of the bull. And the heathens call it Taurus, the bull. Well, the bull is a symbol for the house of Ephraim. In the book of Hosea, Yahuwah says that Ephraim is like a bull. Okay. So the bull, when they slaughtered bullocks on the altar, the bullocks were for the nations, and the lambs were for Israel. Israel represented the lambs, but the bulls represented the nations. So, in other words, the Gentiles, okay? 2 Chronicles 30:16. And they stood in their place after their manner, according to the Torah, the law of Moses, the man of Elohim, the priest sprinkled the blood which they received of the hand of the Levites. Verse 17. For there were many in the congregation that were not sanctified. Therefore the Levites had the charge of the killing of the Passovers for everyone that was not clean to sanctify them unto Yahuwah. So in other words, every head of household, every man who was the head of his household was not sanctified to where he could go into the temple and do the slaughtering himself, but he was able to offer that to the priest, and the priest did it on their behalf. And right there we see Yahushua, a picture of Yahushua becoming that lamb for us that were unclean. And we can't cleanse, we can't save ourselves, but he can do it for us, right? 2 Chronicles 30, verse 18, for a multitude of people, even many of Ephraim and Manasseh and Issachar and Zebulun had not cleansed themselves, yet did they eat the Passover otherwise than it was written. In other words, even though scripture says that you have to be cleansed and sanctified, yet did these people still eat the Passover even though they hadn't cleansed themselves, which seems to go against Torah, right? But you see, we have to recognize that in the scripture, there's Torah, which is the letter of the law, but there's the prophets, and the books of the prophets keep the Torah in balance. So because there's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law, right? And they work together. They go hand in hand. We don't use the spirit of the law or the spirit of the Torah to cancel out the letter, and we don't use the letter to cancel out the spirit. They go hand in hand, okay? So, but Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, the good Yahuwah pardon everyone that prepares his heart to seek Elohim. See, even though they weren't clean outwardly, they prepared their hearts to seek Elohim. Yahuwah Elohim of his fathers, though he be not cleansed according to the purification of the sanctuary. So even though they were not ritually clean according to the purification of the sanctuary, if from their hearts they were clean because they prepared their hearts to seek him, he honored that. Okay? 2 Chronicles 30:20, and Yahuwah hearkened to Hezekiah and healed the people. See, this is so beautiful. It just brings tears to my eyes because there's so many Christians out there that want to keep Passover, but they don't know where to begin. They feel intimidated. Look, it's important that we evangelize these people and give them the opportunity, just like Hezekiah did. Now, we might be able to do it in the second month. If they're not ready for this Passover, we can maybe do it next month, April, in the month of April. Okay. So therefore, it is important that you begin to observe the memorial of Passover more so, even if you don't do it all perfectly. Okay. I'm not suggesting that we should cut corners on purpose. Obviously, we want to come as close as possible in doing things correctly. Okay, so what exactly are we commanded to do? Well, Exodus 12:1, as I already read, we're supposed to do it in the month of Abib, right? He says, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. That's the month of Abib. And then in verse 3, it says, speak you unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month, that would be the 10th day of the month of Abib, they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. Okay? And verse 4 says, and if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of souls. Every man, according to his eating, shall make your count for the lamb. In other words, the lamb should be big enough to feed all the people. You don't want to get a lamb that's too big because then you'll have a lot of waste. It doesn't want you to have a whole lot of waste. Okay? Exodus 12:5, your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from among the sheep or the goats. Now, this is a picture of Messiah. He was sinless. Scripture tells us that he was made sin for us who knew no sin. The book of Hebrews says that we have a high priest who is touched with the feelings of our infirmities, yet without sin. Okay, he had no sin in him. Now, what does it mean that he was a male of the first year? Now, don't get me wrong. I love Michael Rood. I think he's a wonderful teacher. I learned so much from that guy. But he teaches that that him being the male of the first year means that his ministry only lasted for 70 weeks. Well, 70 weeks is longer than a year. So that doesn't even fit. I don't believe that. I believe Yahushua did fulfill a 3.5-year ministry. I have biblical proof of that. In order to make this theory work, he has to remove a couple verses from the book of John to make the theory work. I don't agree with doing that. So what does it mean, a male of the first year? Well, in the Gospels, it says that Caiaphas, the previous year, the previous Passover before Yahushua died, that he prophesied, even though he was a wicked man, because he operated in the office of the high priest. It says he prophesied that one man should die for the nation. Okay, so Caiaphas actually prophesied that Yahushua was going to die the year before he died. Okay, and it was customary for the high priest to select the lamb as soon as it was born. You know, they would have these newborn baby lambs that just came out of the mother, and they would select the lamb and say, this time next year, this lamb is going to be killed. So it was customary for the high priest to select the Passover lamb. So when Caiaphas prophesied this time next year, next Passover, Yahushua of Nazareth will be killed for the whole nation. Okay, now he didn't think that he was going to become the atonement for our sins. He thought that by killing him, that he was ridding us of an evil, an evil false prophet that was just stirring up the people and that kind of thing. He didn't understand the prophetic nature and significance of what he was saying. He said it in the wrong spirit, but nevertheless, he said it. So a male of the first year was fulfilled in Messiah because the high priest declared it a year earlier. Okay? Shemot, Exodus 12:6 says, and you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. Okay, so what you're to do is take the lamb, and what they were supposed to do is bring the lamb into their home for 4 days. So on the 10th day of the month, they would take the little lamb into their house, and they would treat it like a pet, and they would love on it and treat it kindly. Okay, why? Because Yahuwah wanted us to be so attached to that lamb that when we had to kill it, it broke our hearts. We felt so convicted that we had to kill that innocent lamb. Okay, that's why he did it. He wants us to feel sad at the loss of this cute little animal so that we feel sorry for our sins. Okay, because that's why he wanted us to get attached to it like a little pet for 4 days. Now, this coincides with Messiah riding the donkey's colt on what is traditionally called Palm Sunday. But it wasn't on a Sunday. It was on a Sabbath day. Okay? How do we know? Because Scripture tells us that you're supposed to take the lamb on the 10th day of the month and you're supposed to kill it on the 14th day. Well, we know that Messiah Yahushua was killed on the 14th day of Abib, and it was on a Wednesday. Did he not tell us in Matthew 12, verse 40? He says that he would be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. That's exactly 72 hours, 3 24-hour periods. So from Wednesday sundown to Saturday sundown, when he resurrected, it was on a Saturday evening, just as the Sabbath was ending. He didn't resurrect on Sunday morning, okay? He resurrected Saturday night. So he was exactly 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, 72 hours. So the point is, he rode the donkey into Jerusalem, which traditionally the high priest was supposed to ride into Jerusalem on a donkey, and he was supposed to select the lamb that was going to be killed that year. They would take the lamb into the temple and they would keep it for 4 days, and then on the 14th day they would kill the lamb. Well, that year, on what Christianity traditionally calls Palm Sunday, it was actually Palm Sabbath, if you will. He was the high priest that rode into Jerusalem on a donkey's colt. And they understood the significance of why he was riding a donkey's colt. They recognized him as the high priest. That's why they shouted, Hosanna, Hosanna. And they laid palms at his feet because they recognized he was their high priest. What they didn't recognize was that he was also going to be the lamb that was going to be sacrificed. So you see, they were cheering him on as the high priest because they thought he's going to save us from Roman tyranny. That's what they thought. But when he got killed 4 days later, that's not what they were expecting. They were not expecting him to also be the lamb. Okay? So him riding into Jerusalem on a donkey's colt is extremely prophetic because he's displaying himself as the high priest who selects the lamb, and he himself lays down his life for sinners. Nobody took his life from him. He volunteered. Okay. So it says, and you shall keep the lamb up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. Now, the Masoretic text says Bain ha-areb, meaning between the evenings. The English translation says in the evening. Now, stay with me for this explanation on between the evenings. I've already explained in temple times, between the evenings means between 12 noon and I think 3 in the afternoon, which is right around the time when he was crucified. However, in Egypt, they didn't have a standing temple. They hadn't begun to use the vernacular between the evenings to mean between 12 noon and 3 in the afternoon. They hadn't started doing the evening and the morning sacrifices yet, or the morning and the evening sacrifices yet. So I believe when you look up that word evenings, areb, it means sundown. I believe between the evenings literally means between the two sunsets. Between the sunset of the 14th of Abib and the sunset of the 15th of Abib. Okay, so there was 2 nights for slaughtering lambs in first century Jerusalem. Okay, and I have already explained why that is, because in those days, there were so many people coming from the surrounding tribes to Jerusalem with their lambs. I mean, literally thousands upon thousands of people with lambs. It would have been impossible to slaughter that many lambs in a short little window of 2 or 3 hours. That's why they actually had 2 nights for slaughtering lambs. Also, the Pharisees believed in eating the Passover on the 15th day of the month of Abib, whereas the Sadducees believed in eating the lamb on the 14th day. Okay, I am a believer in eating it on the 14th. Okay, because that's when Yahushua did it with his disciples. He said to them, "Go and prepare the Passover that we may eat it." Now, the Passover doesn't mean just bread and wine. The literal meaning of the word Passover, Pesach, means the lamb. So when he says, "Go and prepare the lamb," he doesn't mean just bread and wine. No, he said, "Go and prepare the Pesach, the lamb, that we may eat it." So even though the Gospels doesn't tell us that they were literally eating lamb, by him saying, "Go and prepare the lamb that we may eat it," we understand there was lamb involved and there was unleavened bread involved. Okay, because you're not supposed to eat the Passover lamb with leavened bread. It's forbidden. You have to eat it with the unleavened bread. Okay, so he did eat the Passover lamb That night that people traditionally call the Last Supper, he ate the Passover lamb with his disciples with unleavened bread. Okay. And the following night at the temple, the Jews ate the lamb at that time the following evening. But the disciples didn't do that. They didn't go to the temple the following night after just watching their rabbi, their Messiah, being brutally murdered on the cross. They were sick to their stomachs. They were so distraught. They didn't go to the temple and say, "Oh, let's all go to the temple and eat the Passover." They had to have done it the night before. Because why? They weren't in a good position to eat the Passover right after watching him get brutally killed. The Gospels don't say, "Oh, right after they watched him get killed, they went and ate a Passover meal." No, they didn't. So they had to have eaten the Passover meal the night before with their Messiah. Okay, so these people that argue, "Oh, it wasn't a Passover meal. It was just a covenant meal," or whatever they call it. It was a practice run. People say, "Oh, it was just bread and wine." No, that's all because people don't understand that it was between the two evenings. It was between the two sunsets.
And the disciples, they fled. Most of them fled. They didn't even stick around to see, Mashiach be hung on the cross. They got out of Dodge.
That's right.
So they weren't keeping the Passover anyway.
Now here it says in verse 7, and they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper door of the houses wherein they shall eat it. Now we don't have to do this, okay? Because number one, we're not living in Egypt. There's no threat of the death angel coming over us where we have to take a blood of the lamb and strike it on the doorposts. What we see in this prophetically is that Yahushua is the lamb, and it's his blood that was placed on the two side posts. Did he not say, "I am the door to the sheep"? And are there not two houses of Israel? There's the house of Israel and there's the house of Ephraim. In those days, there were the Egyptians that were considered strangers or Gentiles, and many of them left Egypt with the Israelites and said, "We like your God better than ours. We're coming with you guys." Okay, so there were two houses then. Even there was the strangers that joined the natural-born Israelites. So the two side posts of the door are indicative of the two houses of Israel, and he is the door. He is the door to the two houses of Israel. He says, "I am the door to the sheep." So it's his blood that we're memorializing. We don't have to sacrifice a lamb. In fact, we're forbidden. We are forbidden from sacrificing a lamb unless we are living in Jerusalem. Okay? The only place on earth we are allowed to sacrifice the lamb is in Jerusalem. So if you're living in the nations, and then you are not allowed to do an animal sacrifice. Okay. Now, if you own a farm and you have your own lamb and you can't find good kosher meat at the market and you want to, have your own Passover lamb, that's fine. Just don't sacrifice it on the 14th, because if you sacrifice it on the 14th, it's going to be misconstrued as conducting an animal sacrifice away from Jerusalem. But if you kill it, say, on the 13th, and then, prepare the meat and then wait till the 14th to roast it, then that should be fine. Okay, because you're not doing it as a sacrifice. You're just, killing your own animal instead of going to the market to buy an animal, because most grocery stores these days, their meat is not killed the proper way. You're supposed to slit the throat and let the animal bleed out. But the way they kill it in the meat packing plants, they don't do it the right way. So what we do to make sure we're not getting meat that's all gorged with blood is we soak the meat very good in icy cold salt water, and that draws all the blood out of the meat. Okay?
Yeah, so to be clear, butchering, slaughtering for food is totally okay.
Yes, it's not a sacrifice. I recommend not waiting till the 14th to do it, because then it could be misconstrued as a sacrifice. Okay. Now, Exodus 12:8 says, and they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. They shall eat it. Now, a lot of people like to use horseradish for their bitter herbs. I hate horseradish. I use dandelion greens and I make a salad out of it. I buy dandelion greens, organic dandelion greens, or I buy chicory or, bitter lettuces like that, and they make a really good vinaigrette dressing and make a salad with it. Okay, so that's what I do for my bitter herbs.
I would recommend having a few pieces without the dressing so you really taste the bitterness.
Right.
Because once you have dressing on it, it's pretty good.
Sure, exactly. But it was a bittersweet. Okay, so that's why I put a little bit of sweetness in my dressing, because it was a bittersweet. On the one hand, it was bitter because they had just gone through hard labor in Egypt. But it was also sweet because now they were being delivered. So Exodus 12:9 says, eat not of it raw or sodden, which means boiled at all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs and with the purtenance thereof. Now, obviously, you're not going to be cooking a whole lamb because we're in diaspora. We're not able to, we don't have our own farms. Many of us don't have our own farms, and we don't have our own sheep or goats. Some people do, but most of us don't. So, you can either order the lamb online and have it shipped to you on dry ice, which is what I've done in many years, or if you can buy it at the store. So you're not, there's some of this you can't really do, but you do the best you can. You do as much of it as you can, right? Shemot, Exodus 12:10 says, and you shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. And that which remains of it until the morning you shall burn with fire. Now, I've done this before where, we don't cook a whole lot of lamb, just enough for the people that are going to be partaking. And if you got a few pieces left and you want to burn it on the grill and burn it till it's charred, it's a burnt offering, okay, before Yahuwah. If there's, the whole point of it is that Yahushua was a picture of the red heifer. Okay, the red heifer also is the only sacrifice that's done outside the temple. It's done away from the city limits. And the red heifer is escorted outside the city limits. And the red heifer was to be burned into ashes to cleanse the altar in the temple. Why did the temple and the altar need to be cleansed? Because as a nation, they became guilty of innocent blood. They all shouted, crucify him, crucify him. In Numbers chapter 19, the purpose of the red heifer is for if a dead body is found in Israel and nobody knows who killed this person, just a dead body's found, the whole nation would be guilty of that innocent blood of that person that died in their land. So the red heifer was killed, and the priest would use the ashes of the red heifer to cleanse the altar so that as a nation, they weren't guilty of innocent blood. Well, guess what? The whole nation shouted, crucify him. So therefore, their Passover lamb would have been invalid that year. However, because he became the red heifer and he was escorted outside of the city and taken to the place of the skull, he also performed the pattern of the red heifer, not only the Passover lamb, but the red heifer. Okay? That's the only sacrifice that's done outside of the city limits of Jerusalem. That's found in Numbers 19. A lot of Jews, anti-missionaries that tried to convince believers to forsake Messiah, they'll say, oh, he couldn't have been the Passover lamb because he wasn't killed in the temple. And the Passover lamb is supposed to be slaughtered in the temple. So they think they found their proof that he's not the Messiah. Well, guess what? You can bring up the red heifer. He was also fulfilling the red heifer. Okay? You see, Yehoshua actually fulfilled all the temple sacrifices in one fell swoop. Okay? He was also fulfilling the pattern of the twin goats. Why? Because Barabbas was the guilty party And Yahushua was the innocent party. And what does the word scapegoat mean? The word scapegoat means the innocent party who takes the guilt away from the guilty party, right? Who takes the place of the guilty party. Did not Yahushua take the place of Barabbas? Barabbas, his name in Aramaic is Bar Abba, which means son of the father. Barabbas was a prophetic picture of the nation of Israel. So as a nation, they were all guilty, just as Barabbas was guilty. And just as Barabbas was guilty of innocent blood and he should have been killed, but he was let go. The people shouted Barabbas, set Barabbas free, and kill Yahushua of Nazareth. So he became the scapegoat for the guilty party, the nation of Israel. So not only was he fulfilling the Passover lamb, he was also fulfilling the pattern of the twin goats, the sacrificial goat and the scapegoat that gets let go. And he was also fulfilling the red heifer. So you see, he was fulfilling all the sacrifices in one fell swoop. Okay, Shemot, Exodus 12:11, and thus you shall eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is Yahuwah's Passover. Okay, so basically, we are to eat the lamb, the Passover lamb, and like I said, we're not doing a blood sacrifice. We're not allowed to do a blood sacrifice. We are only doing a memorial. If you can't find lamb at the store, what you can use is beef. I would not use chicken, and here's the reason why. Chicken is, our Messiah was no chicken. If you try to kill a chicken, you know what it does? It runs away from you, and it starts squawking. That is not a proper metaphor for our Messiah. Now, I know that in modern times, the Jewish people eat chicken at Passover time. I don't like that metaphor. That doesn't describe him. Beef, of course, beef, they sacrifice bulls on the altar for the nations. If you can't find lamb, then use beef. I think beef is fine because it represents the bullock, the house of Ephraim. And he became the red heifer also. So not only was he's the Passover lamb, he was also the red heifer. Okay, so if you can't find lamb, beef is fine. I definitely wouldn't use chicken though. Okay. Shemot, Exodus 12:12. For I will pass through the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt, this night, and I will smite all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, or Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Mitzrayim I will execute judgment. I am Yahuwah. Okay, verse 13, Shemot 12:13, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Mitzrayim. Shemot, Exodus 12:14, and this day shall be unto you for a memorial. See, that's a key word, memorial. And you shall keep it a feast to Yahuwah throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. Now notice, he doesn't say keep it a feast only until the Messiah dies on the cross. No, he said forever. Shemot 12:15, and 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread, even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses, for whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. Okay? So we are to remove anything in our house that has leaven or yeast in it. Now, some people try to say that baking soda is a leavening agent or baking powder. I don't qualify that as a leavening agent. Now, some people do. That's fine. I don't qualify that as, even though it is a leavening agent. What is leaven? Well, if you've ever made sourdough bread before, what happens is you keep some of that fermented dough right? And the next time you make a new loaf of bread, you take that fermented dough out of the refrigerator, because the refrigerator would kind of stall the fermenting process and keep it from getting overly processed. So you would take that fermented dough out of the refrigerator, and now you let it sit at room temperature for a while. And now you make a fresh batch of dough, and you add that sourdough, that fermented dough, to the fresh batch. That's your leavening. Okay? That's what it means when scripture says leaven. Okay? Baking soda is, yeah, you can use it to leaven things, but I don't believe that counts as a leavening, as a leaven. Okay? Because I use baking soda for tons of things. I add it to my wash cycle when I wash clothes, and I buy big 8-pound bags of baking soda at Costco. I'm not going to dump all that out because I use it for cleaning. So I don't count baking soda as a leavening agent. If you want to, that's fine. If you're convicted of that, I don't count baking soda.
Well, in scripture, what they would do is specifically, while they were trekking,
Yeah.
right, and on the move for Passover, or the first Passover,
yeah,
they would mix the dry ingredients, and they wouldn't let it sit. If they kept it each day, even the raw dough, then over the days, their bread would be more and more leavened because yeast is in the air. So there was no leavening happening.
Right.
So it's very clear how the leavening got there and that it was a natural occurrence. Adding baking soda is not a natural occurrence. If you had a sterile room where you had the hospital, filtration system, whatever, and there was no yeast and you let it sit, you wouldn't have rising bread.
That's right.
And so that's the natural situation. Baking soda is unnatural.
Exactly. So, so here on Exodus 12:16 says, and in the first day there shall be a holy convocation, and the seventh day there shall be a holy convocation to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat. That only may be done for you. So let's go to the calendar. Do I still have the moon phase calendar? Okay. So here's how it's going to go. Okay. On March 27th, right here, next Saturday, at sundown, we're going to reenact the Last Supper. I just say that for lack of a better term, but that would be the Passover meal that our Messiah ate with his disciples. We're going to reenact that. Now, we're not going to reenact it exactly, but that's what we're celebrating. That's what we're memorializing. And he said, do this in remembrance of me. Okay. And you don't have to have a Seder, but I have a list of scriptures that I've compiled. So for the first night, Passover, the 14th of Abib, so you're going to read Exodus 7:1 through Exodus 12:31. I'm going to make a list of this and attach it to the blog. So you're going to read Exodus 7 through 12, and that's going to give the account of the 10 plagues in Egypt. It also gives the account of Israel slaughtering the lamb and the death angel passing over Egypt, taking the firstborn of the Egyptians. The reading will conclude with Pharaoh calling for Moses and Aaron into the middle of the night. Then you're going to read the gospel accounts, which from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that from all four gospels, you're going to read the account of Messiah on the night that he ate his Passover meal with his disciples. And then we read about the night that he was arrested and brought before the high priest in the middle of the night. You see the parallels there. At the first Passover, Moses and Aaron were called to Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night. At Messiah's Passover, he was called in the middle of the night to the high priest. So on Passover, those are the scriptures we're going to read, and I'm going to compile this list for you so you can have the list. On the second night, the following night of unleavened bread, on the 15th of Abib, we're going to read all the scriptures from Exodus 12 and 13, which detail the events that took place the day after the firstborn of the Egyptians when they died. Then we're going to read Numbers 33, which details Israel borrowing from the Egyptians and leaving Egypt that night as the Egyptians were burying their dead. Then we're going to read Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John, all the gospel accounts. We're going to read all 4 gospel accounts where our Messiah was being brought before Pontius Pilate and then sent to the place of the skull to be crucified. We will read right up until the account where his body was taken down from the cross and buried. Okay. Then, first fruits, which traditionally is called Resurrection Day. The Leviticus 23 tells us that the first fruits is to be celebrated on the first Sabbath following the Passover at sundown. Sabbath after the Passover, the first Sabbath after the Passover at sundown is first fruits. So on that day, which, let's see, if we're going to be keeping Pesach here and unleavened bread here, right? That means that April 3rd, Saturday, April 3rd, is going to be first fruits, okay? What traditionally is called Resurrection Day, but we don't keep it during the day. We wait until Saturday night just before the sun goes down, and that's when we recognize that it's the first fruits. It's the day of first fruits. It's Resurrection Day, and we celebrate it all day long into April 4th. Okay. So not only is it going to be first fruits, but it's also going to be the last day of the 7-day unleavened bread cycle. So the first night right here, which would be the 20th, all day, 27th at sundown into the next day, the 28th. Then there's unleavened bread. We keep 7 days. So this is be the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20, and then 21. So right up until the 21st day of Abib, we keep the unleavened bread. Okay, but it's also going to land on first fruits. So this year, first fruits and the last day of unleavened bread are going to coincide. That doesn't always happen, but this year it's going to be that way.
So to be clear for people who are not used to doing this, the last day is all the way through Sunday, right? It's the whole day Sunday. So it starts Saturday night, last day Sunday, all day.
Exactly.
That's the high day.
So on the day of first fruits, we read Exodus 14 through 15. We read all of Exodus 14 and all of Exodus 15, which details the events of Israel arriving at the Red Sea and the Egyptians drowning in the sea as the Israelites crossed over to the other side. We also read all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John, the gospel accounts of when the women went back to the tomb to anoint the body of Yahushua and found that he had already risen from the dead. So even if you don't have a Passover Haggadah or a Seder, just reading the scriptures, which I'm going to provide for you guys, just reading the scriptures on their respective holy days, I believe you're fulfilling the scripture. You're fulfilling the command. You're telling the story to your children. And that's all he requires. Okay. Let's see. Let me go to the block to the block. Okay. So Shemot 12:17, Exodus 12:17 says, "And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in this self same day have I brought your armies out of the land of Mitzrayim or Egypt. Therefore shall you observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 20th day of the first, until the 1 and 20th day, 1 and 20th day. That's the 21st day of the month at evening." Shemot 12, Exodus 12:19, 7 days there shall be no leaven found in your houses, for whosoever eats that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a stranger or born in the land. Now, leaven is a symbol of sin because, what does Paul say in 1 Corinthians 5? He says, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. In other words, you open the door to sin, and then other sins are, come from that. All it takes is just a little bit of sinning, and then the floodgates of Satan come in and tempt you to commit even more sins. So that's the reason why leaven is a picture of sin. Okay, Exodus 12:20 says, "You shall eat nothing leavened in all your habitations. You shall eat unleavened bread." Exodus 12:21, "Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, Draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover." So we don't have to do that unless, like I said, you own a farm and you have your own lamb. That's fine. But because we are only allowed to slaughter a lamb as a sacrifice in Jerusalem, I wouldn't do it on the 14th. I would do it the day before on the 13th, so as not to be misconstrued as a sacrifice. All right, so Exodus 12:22 says, "And you shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the two side posts with the blood that is in the basin, and none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning." Now, in the Passover Seder, in the traditional Passover Seder, we use parsley, and we dip the parsley in salt water, okay? Because that pictures the covenant of salt, which I'll get into that another time. But then when we're supposed to take the salt water that we dip the parsley in and eat it, okay? But you don't really have to do that because, of course, we're not in Egypt. We're not awaiting the death angel to come over our city or our town. So it's not like you can't leave your house. I mean, it's advisable that you should stay home anyway, but just the whole point of it is, the disciples, our Messiah and his disciples, left the upper room and went to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he died. They didn't stay indoors all night because there was no death angel passing over them that night. Okay. This was for that specific event that the death angel was passing over Egypt, and that's why they were told to stay indoors. Okay. But when our Messiah was celebrating his Passover, they didn't stay indoors all night. They actually went outdoors and went to the garden to pray. Not only that, they were inside the house of Judah. They were within the city limits of Jerusalem, so they were still in the house. Okay, all the people in Jerusalem were keeping Passover. They were in the house, the whole house of Israel. It wasn't until the morning that he left the house and was escorted to the place of the skull. Okay, so you can look at it that way too. Shemot, Exodus 12:23. "For Yahuwah will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts, Yahuwah will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you." Okay, Exodus 12:24. "And you shall observe this thing for an ordinance to you and to your sons forever." Verse 25, "And it shall come to pass when you be come to the land which Yahuwah gives you, according as he has promised, that you shall keep this service." Exodus 12:26 says, "And it shall come to pass when your children shall say unto you, What mean you this by this service?" Verse 27 says, "That you shall say, It is the sacrifice of Yahuwah's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Mitzrayim or Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed the head and worshipped." Okay, so now that we have read all the requirements of Exodus 12, let's narrow it down to what we who are in exile, we're in the nations. What are the specific things we are commanded to do under the renewed covenant of Messiah while living in the nations? Okay, so the first thing, remove all the leaven or the yeast from your home before Passover begins. Number 2, tell the story to your children of the Exodus. And that also includes our Messiah's Passover in the gospel account. Okay, because he did set us free from slavery to sin. And when he gave up his spirit, that was his Exodus, right? His spirit left his body and he went into the lower parts of the earth. So that was his Exodus. So I would tell both the story of the Exodus as well as the gospel account of the Passover. Okay, number 3, eat roasted lamb if you can find it in the store, okay? With bitter herbs. You have to eat it with bitter herbs. Like I said, I can't stand horseradish. I make bitter herb salad with dandelion greens and chicory. I make a really good vinaigrette. I put stevia in the vinaigrette so that it's like a bittersweet flavor. I put lemon juice, apple cider vinegar, and garlic and herbs and olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. Okay. Eat this with unleavened bread. I make homemade unleavened bread. I will attach the recipe for the unleavened bread to this blog in the next few days. I just have to learn how to attach PDF files to blogs because I don't know how to do that. I might have to look it up on YouTube or something. Or you can make homemade unleavened bread. You could Google. There's lots of good recipes online. I like to brush my unleavened bread. I make it like on a pizza pan with holes in it or on a pizza stone. I brush it with garlic and olive oil and rosemary and sprinkle some Parmesan Romano and Asiago cheeses on it. So it's sort of like a white pizza, if you will. So I like to make it like that. Like I said, if you can't find lamb, beef is a good substitute. Like I said, I do not believe in using chicken. Our Messiah was no chicken. A lamb, when you try to kill a lamb willingly lays down his life. He doesn't try to run away. He lays down and becomes calm and allows you to slit its throat. It's the same thing with an ox or a bull. I mean, they let you slit their throat. Not a chicken. Chickens try to run away. So I wouldn't use a chicken. That's not a proper metaphor for our Messiah. He fulfilled the pattern of the Passover lamb as well as the red heifer. Therefore, lamb or beef are acceptable metaphors. Number 5, like I said, read about the Exodus account in the book of Exodus and read about the Passover crucifixion in the Gospels. Okay, so that's it. I mean, it's really, if you really want to narrow it down, I would say these 5, I misnumbered this. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. I numbered this as a 5. Okay, but these 4 things, just these 4 things, that's all you got to do. Okay, I'm not against a traditional Jewish Haggadah or Passover service. I want to make it easy for those that feel intimidated by the idea of conducting a Passover ceremony in their home. Like I said, I do have a renewed covenant Passover Haggadah that I published years ago. I will attach it to this blog later. Okay, now I'm almost done. We're going to be wrapping this up and entering into discussion very soon. But this is a word of caution. Now, you may want to invite Christians or church people over to your home to learn how to keep Passover. However, if you decide to do this, please warn them ahead of time that they must abandon all pagan holidays and repent of all sin before deciding to keep the feasts of Yahuwah. And include yourself. Say, we all must sanctify ourselves before keeping the Passover. So that they don't feel like, you're only calling them sinners and you're above them, so to speak. Say, we all must prepare our hearts to keep the Passover. And explain to them, once you put your hand to the plow, what did our Messiah say? He says, he who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not worthy of the kingdom. So once you start to keep the feast days, that's like putting your hand to the plow. He says, you can't look back and say, oh, I still miss Christmas or Easter. No, you can't mix the holy with the profane.
The same as leaving Egypt and then looking back.
Exactly.
Or Sodom and Gomorrah and looking back.
Like Lot's wife, exactly. And like Israel, when they kept saying, oh, we had leeks and cucumbers in Egypt. Oh, I wish we could be back there again. So the basis for this can be found in Acts 15:29. The Gentiles wanting to learn the Torah or the Mosaic law after being born again by the blood of Yahushua were expected to adhere to the following commands before being allowed to fellowship with mature believers. Okay, here's what it says, Acts 15:29, that you abstain. So the Jerusalem council got together and says, for the Gentiles that are learning to keep Torah, we command that they abstain from meat offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from fornication, from which, if you keep yourselves, you shall do well, fare you well. Okay, so let's break this down in modern vernacular. Abstain from Unclean animals, as per Leviticus 11. Abstain from unclean holidays offered up to Baal. That includes Christmas, Easter, Halloween, Valentine's Day. Number 3, abstain from animal blood or human blood. That includes no, because contain both. Okay. We are to, like I said, if you're going to eat steak, I soak my steak in icy cold salt water, draw the blood out because we're not supposed to eat blood. Then I let it drain on paper towels to get all the moisture out of it before I fry it, on the cast iron skillet. Okay. Number 4, unless you own a farm and your own livestock, it is nearly impossible to find meat that is killed properly. The next best thing is to soak your meat in icy cold salt water to extract the blood before cooking.
Just as a side note, I do know a brother in Mashiach who he and his family eat as vegetarians unless they personally know the people who butchered the animal and they're doing it biblically. In which case, they love a good steak, they love lamb, they love, chicken, whatever. But if it comes from people they don't know, a store, they're vegetarians.
Yeah, that's fine. That's their conviction. I respect it.
Yep.
But we're doing the keto diet, and we wouldn't be getting enough protein if we did that. So abstain from roadkill. That means animals that are not killed in the proper way via strangulation or the like. Okay, because animals that have been strangled, the blood doesn't drain out, so the meat is just gorged with blood. Number 6, abstain from sexual sin. That includes premarital sex. Now, I know there's a lot of Hebrew roots people say, oh, it doesn't say that in the Bible. Yes, it does. We are to wait for the wedding night. The couples are supposed to wait till the wedding night to consummate. That's why the parents of the bride hold on to the tokens of her virginity to prove that she was a virgin on the wedding night. Otherwise, she could be stoned to death because she's committed harlotry.
And vows/covenants were always made.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, of course, some people might say, well, what if she's not a virgin anymore? What if she's a widow or divorced? Well, in that case, the blood of the lamb covers us. But still, there's, we are to wait until the wedding night. That is so that nobody can say, oh, she wasn't, pure before the wedding night. Okay. So this is totally to protect the woman.
Not to have you look up this right now, but didn't you look up the different words for adultery or a harlot and whatever?
Yeah.
And basically, they're all synonymous. Fornication and harlotry are the same thing.
That's right. The Hebrew word for fornication is harlotry. Exactly. Exodus 12:48 says, and when a stranger shall sojourn with you and will keep the Passover to Yahuwah, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it, and he shall be one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. Okay, now I want to explain this, okay? So the original way of keeping Passover involved conducting a lamb sacrifice and then applying the blood on the doorposts of your home. Moving forward, after Israel was finally settled in the Promised Land and Joshua allotted each tribe their land, the Passover sacrifices had to be done in Jerusalem only and in no other place on earth. However, we are still commanded to keep the Passover as a memorial, and we are told that this is to be done forever unto all generations in all your dwellings. That means wherever we are on earth, every place on earth where we will be dwelling. Okay, so we are commanded to remember and to tell the story to our children of the first Passover in Egypt. We are also commanded to observe the Passover in remembrance of our Messiah's sacrifice on the cross. In Luke 22:19, it says, and he took bread and gave thanks and broke it and gave thanks unto them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me. 1 Corinthians 11:24, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. Okay, therefore, even when we are living in Gentile nations, we are still commanded to celebrate a memorial. And see, that's the key word. It's a memorial. We're not actually sacrificing a Passover lamb. Okay? And therefore, because if we were actually doing an actual sacrifice, the males would have to be circumcised in their flesh. Okay? The reason why all males participating in the Passover sacrifice are required to be physically circumcised is because it's temple protocol. Ezekiel 44:9 says, "Thus says Yahuwah, no stranger uncircumcised in heart nor uncircumcised in flesh shall enter into my sanctuary of any stranger that is among the children of Israel." That means that you have to be both circumcised in the heart and in the flesh in order to enter the temple. Okay. Because you will not be conducting an animal sacrifice in Jerusalem, there is no need to be physically circumcised in the flesh. Okay. You see, physical circumcision in the flesh serves only as an outward sign. It's not a means to salvation. It's a sign of your salvation. Romans 4:11 says, this is speaking of Abraham, it says, "And he received the sign of circumcision, a seal of the righteousness of the faith, which he had yet being uncircumcised." That means he already had faith before he was circumcised, "that he might be the father of all them that believe, though they be not circumcised, that righteousness might be imputed also unto them." So all that is required to keep a memorial of Passover is to be circumcised in the heart. Okay? So all participants must be circumcised inwardly in the heart. In other words, born again, have repented of all paganism. If you want to invite some believers over to your home to keep Passover, I suggest leading them into a prayer of renouncing Baal worshiping holidays and baptizing them in water in your home or their home, in the bathtub or in a local body of water, a swimming pool, etc. I would also suggest doing this earlier in the week prior to the day you're going to be celebrating the Passover. Okay, now I want to explain something about circumcision because people get all confused about this. So while it is true that outward circumcision is required by Yahuwah to be part of Abraham's covenant, it was always meant to represent inward circumcision of the heart. Deuteronomy 10:16 says, "Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no more stiff-necked." Deuteronomy 30 verse 6 says, "And Yahuwah your Elohim will circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed to love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live." Jeremiah 4:4 says, "Circumcise yourselves to Yahuwah and take away the foreskins of your heart, you men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, lest my fury come forth like fire and burn, that none can quench it because of the evil of your doings." So circumcision of the heart and circumcision in the flesh is required if you're going to do an actual Passover sacrifice in the temple, according to Ezekiel 44:8-9. But since there is no temple standing right now in Jerusalem at this time, and you're in diaspora, you're living in a different nation, physical circumcision is not required to keep Passover. Now, I do believe that we should circumcise our baby boys on the 8th day, just as scripture commands. However, for grown men wanting to be circumcised in the flesh, it is strongly advisable for practical reasons. Medical science has proven that when men who are uncircumcised, their wives have are more likely to contract cervical cancer because it's very difficult to get the foreskin to keep it clean. I mean, you'd have to, pull it.
It's probably not so much difficult. It's just laziness.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is that there are practical reasons why I strongly advocate circumcision in the flesh, right? But I don't believe it's a requirement if you're keeping a memorial of Passover. Only if you're actually participating in a real Passover sacrifice in Jerusalem, then of course, yes, you must be circumcised in the flesh. But if you're just keeping the memorial of Passover, then no, you don't have to be circumcised in the flesh.
I'd like to go one step further with that. So for a minute, let's say we're not talking about Passover, and let's say we're not talking about circumcision. Anytime we're reading scripture as a person who's in covenant with Yahuwah, anytime we recognize there's something he's called us to do and it's within our power to do it, but we're not doing it, and we go, that's inconvenient, I don't want to do that. We better think long and hard about what your flesh is telling you to do versus that little voice, that conviction. Maybe you'll have a dream, maybe it'll be more than a little voice. But, when Yahuwah calls us to keep these feasts forever, we already know we can't do it perfectly. There's a loss of information. We don't have the temple. We're not in the land. Yeah. Yet we don't use those reasons to say, I got a gimme, get out of jail free card. And if you have that attitude, you're going to have to answer for that. Exactly. I know, a guy who is in his 30s, and I know a man who is in his mid 60s who got circumcised. Right. It's not like you can't get it done. Yeah. It's not like it's the worst thing in the world.
Right.
I'm not saying you can't do a Passover without being circumcised in the flesh. Obviously, as we saw, the apostles for 40 years until the temple was destroyed, continued to preach, and they were talking to the Gentiles and the Goyim, and of course the diaspora among them. But I'm sure they were not all circumcised as they began to turn back to the God of the Bible, Elohim, and we're hearing the preaching about Messiah. Yet, as they begin to walk and they realize, I haven't done what I'm supposed to do, I've been called to do this and I haven't, it's at that point that you make it right.
Yeah, so if you're a grown male that lives in Jerusalem where we are required to sacrifice the lamb, you are required to be circumcised in the flesh before offering up a Passover sacrifice. The key word is sacrifice, okay? Now, let's see what the Apostle Shaul or Paul has to say about this matter. Colossians 2:11. It says, in him, meaning Messiah, also you were circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Mashiach. So in other words, when he put off the old body of sins in the flesh and we are joined to him, we are circumcised in the heart, okay, without hands, okay. Philippians 3:3, for we are the circumcision who worship by the Ruach of Elohim and glory in Mashiach Yahushua and put no confidence in the flesh. 1 Corinthians 7:19 says, for neither circumcision counts for anything nor uncircumcision, but keeping the commandments of Elohim. Galatians 5:6 says, for in Mashiach Yahushua, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything, but only faith working through love. Okay, now Romans 2:25-29 says, for if for circumcision indeed is of value if you obey the Torah, the law. But if you break the Torah, the law, your circumcision becomes uncircumcision. So if a man is uncircumcised, who is uncircumcised, keeps the precepts of the Torah, will not his uncircumcision be regarded as circumcision? Then he who is physically uncircumcised but keeps the Torah will condemn you who have the written law or the code and circumcision but break the Torah. In other words, just because you're outwardly circumcised, and if you disregard other places of other precepts of the Torah, then your outward circumcision means nothing. And then he goes on, he says, for no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical. But a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart by the Spirit, not of the letter. His praise is not from man, but from Elohim. Galatians 6:15 says, for neither circumcision counts for anything, nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. Romans 4:11 says, speaking of Abraham, he received the sign of circumcision as a seal of his righteousness that he had by faith while he was yet uncircumcised. The purpose was to make him the father of all who believe while being circumcised, so that righteousness would be counted to them as well. Jeremiah 9:25 says, behold, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, when I will punish all those who are circumcised merely in the flesh. Okay? Ephesians 2:11. Therefore, remember that at one time you Gentiles in the flesh, called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, which is made in the flesh by hands. Okay? So this is also addressed in Acts 15, 1 through 41. It says, but some men came down from Judea and were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. And after Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and debate with them, Paul and Barnabas and some of the others were appointed to go up to Jerusalem to the apostles and the elders about this question. So being sent on their way by the assembly, they passed through both Phoenicia and Samaria, describing in detail the conversion of the Gentiles, and brought great joy to all the brothers. When they came to Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the assembly and the apostles and the elders, and they declared that all that Elohim had done with them. Okay, so do some believers belong? But some believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees rose up and said, it is necessary to circumcise them and to order them to keep the law of Moses. So what was wrong with what they were saying, the Pharisees? You see, they were putting the cart before the horse. In other words, they were placing more importance on outward circumcision than inward circumcision of the heart. Yes, I believe that all males should be circumcised in their flesh, but not as a prerequisite to salvation and not as a prerequisite to keeping a Passover memorial. Okay?
Amen.
So, you see, the Pharisees were missing the entire meaning of circumcision. It would be no different than a man who gives his wife roses for her birthday, but during the rest of the year, he ignores her and barely gives her the affection she desires. You see, Yahuwah wants our circumcision to be genuine from the heart, not merely going through the motions. So that concludes our discussion about the beginner's guide to observing Passover.
Yahuwah bless you and keep you. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. We hope you've enjoyed today's broadcast and that you are encouraged in your walk with Messiah. For more teachings, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified of our latest content. Visit Maria's many blogs at doubleportioninheritance.com. That's doubleportioninheritance.com. This ministry is made possible by the prayers and support of listeners like you. To make a donation by PayPal or Venmo.com, use the email address doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. That's doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. On behalf of Maria and Gary at Double Portion Inheritance Ministries, may Yahuwah bless you.